Hi everyone, I'm really sorry we're a little late this week. Hi everyone, I'm really sorry we're a little late this week. We had a few technical difficulties we're still working on. Welcome to the last talk in this series, but we have a new one coming up soon. I'll talk about that in a minute. Tonight again, we have Susie and Kelly helping us out with the technical side of stuff. We have Hamish, our apiary officer, who's going to help out with questions, and we have a special guest tonight. We have Jo Martin, who is Secretary of the Queensland Beekeepers Association, and you won't be able to see her, unfortunately, just yet, but she's on the line on the phone. How are you going, Jo? No? Jo?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback, so I'll just wait.
Okay, we'll see how we go with that. So to tell you a little bit about the next series that's coming up, we'll be starting again on the 4th of August, so 2 weeks time, same place. And our first talk in that series is going to be on ants, wax moth and hive beetle. And because I know everybody has these from time to time, I'm sure it'll be a very popular talk. I've had a few requests for this one. The remainder, I haven't set them in stone yet. And we have a bit of an online feedback survey form that I'd love you guys if you could give me some feedback this evening. We're going to post that in the Q&A, and if you've registered for the talk, I'm also going to send it out to all the people who've registered. And that's just to get a bit of feedback, to find out what's working and what's not. And also, if you want to vote for your favourite topics for the rest of this upcoming new season of series, or if you've got more suggestions, that would be fantastic as well, because we want to try and talk about things that you guys are really interested in as well. If you've missed any of the talks, of course, the links are all there. Just click on those original links and we'll put those up again in the Q&A section. And they should soon be up on the DAF and the Be Aware website, so they should be there as well. Now, the speaker we've got in this evening, Jo, is from the Queensland Beekeepers Association. You just want me to tell us a little bit about that, Jo, and what that means?
Sure thing. Beck, can you get any feedback coming through?
No, I can hear it fine.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm just going to ignore you speaking in the background. Beck, thank you for having me on. For everyone.
Oh, we've lost you, Jo.
Yes, we have. Sorry. I had it go very quiet for a moment. Okay. You've got to love technology, ladies and gents. Now, effectively, I'm from the Queensland Beekeepers Association, the state secretary, and basically my job here at the QBA is oiling the wheels that are turning, and keeping the industry moving. So fundamentally, the Queensland Beekeepers Association was established way back in 1886. So we come from very, very humble beginnings, but we are all here about representing our industry in Queensland. So we look after beekeeping matters at local level, at state level, and also provide some national representation when required. The benefits about the Queensland Beekeepers Association is that we regularly liaise with state agencies, different departments within and also we have the ability to cross borders and discuss beekeeping matters with other beekeeping agencies, DAF, DPI, South Wales, Agriculture Victoria. So our extension is something that probably not really available to many beekeepers on the group, but certainly by becoming a beekeeping member of the QBA, you get access to people like myself, a whole body of management team that are really driven to make sure we've got a prosperous, successful beekeeping future ahead of us. So,
great, thanks, Jo. And so QBA plays a really important role for beekeepers in Queensland, and that's why I'm really excited to have Jo here tonight, because our topic tonight is the Biosecurity Code of Practice for the honeybee industry. And this is an important document that's been developed both by industry and by government as a set of minimum guidelines that beekeepers should be following to make sure they've got best practice. So again, although these are a good guideline, they are definitely the minimum you should be doing as a beekeeper. So Jo, tell me a little bit about why this code of practice is so important to the honeybee industry.
Well, Beck, the beekeeping code of practice really, it relates to a more whole approach to beekeeping itself. The code of practice really comes down a few sort of key dynamics itself. Ultimately, it's all about increasing protection for the beekeeping industry. It really assists in helping beekeepers recognise exotic pests and other endemic diseases within their apiaries. It very much ensures that beekeepers are conducting regular surveillance, regular inspections of their hives, so it's giving them sort of minimum guidelines on them. It also assists in the management of endemic diseases, a particular focus of American foulbrood, which is a problem that most beekeepers will encounter at one time in their beekeeping practices. The benefits also align itself with being practice. So it's something that's adopted through cross-border beekeepers are migratory. So they'll regularly commute from Queensland to Wales. Look, we've even got that movement of hives going down to Victoria and pollination. So the benefit of the national code of practice really aligns the entire industry with a set minimum requirements that need to be undertaken, need to be employed within your beekeeping practice. And it doesn't relate just to commercial beekeepers, it does cover the hobby style beekeeping aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jo. It really does include all beekeepers. Now, although it's not in the legislation in Queensland as it is in other states, what I would say about Queensland beekeepers is it is a really good way to make sure you're meeting your general biosecurity obligation. And so in that way, it is kind of enshrined in your legal requirements to make sure you're doing that best practice biosecurity beekeeping. Now, the code of practice is divided into a few different parts. The first part is a bit of an explanation. Parts B, C, and D are the other sections, and they're broken up into the first part, Part B, which is bits that all beekeepers should be doing. The second part, Part C, is the bit where we're talking about beekeepers with at least 50 hives should definitely be doing, and other beekeepers probably should. And the final part, Part D, is other recommendations. So, Jo, can you tell me a little bit about why these different sections are broken up like that?
Oh, absolutely. So it's important, I suppose, that it is well recognised that there's different large dynamics in the beekeeping industry. You have your beekeepers that are 100% dependent on their beekeeping operation for their bread and butter, so our commercial or our professional beekeepers. And then you've also got this other dynamic of beekeepers as well that might be backyard beekeepers, hobby beekeepers, or just beekeeping enthusiasts at the end of the day. So, but more so, it's having different sections, so it's very, very clear to see what the expectations and requirements are for each of those dynamics of the industry. Obviously, 5 big key of the code of practice itself, related to observing beehives for signs of pest disease, controlling disease in the apiary, controlling the spread undetected disease in the apiary, looking at accurate records. That's the number one thing. That's records and data is so important to managing a healthy apiary. Equipment is also a very, very important part of the code of practice as well. So it's really defining a clear line between commercial activity practice and what could be a hobby beekeeping practice.
Okay, thanks, Jo. So let's start by talking about Part B, which is definitely for all beekeepers need to make sure that they're undertaking these components. And these bits in Part B, the first 2 sections, are around making sure that your hive is registered. So making sure it's registered in the relevant state or territory where you live or where you're moving your hives to. So you may, if you move it, need to register in another state as well. and making sure that when you do register that all your details are correct, in particular the number of hives that you have under your control. So we really need to know how many hives you have, and that helps us be able to manage hives on a state level, beekeeping at a state level, to know really what's out there and what we need to be concerned about. Now the next section is sorry. The next section that we're going to be looking at is one that is about oh, sorry, I made a mistake there, guys. Sorry, I'm looking at the technical side of things. So when it comes to registration, remember that if you're a hobby beekeeper, it's actually free to register. So it's really quick and easy. You can register online. There are also in this next section, the next set of requirements are all about checking your hives for pests and diseases. So Jo, would you like to take us through why that is so important for all beekeepers to make sure they're undertaking?
So the checking of hives itself, I suppose when you're a hobby beekeeper, generally you've probably got a little bit more time up your hands to sit and observe and make observations, obviously, of what you're free. So, you know, the code really stipulates that a minimum inspection twice a year to occur. That sort of minimum inspection will help you to ascertain, you know, what your hive activity is like, the health of the hive and things like that going on. It's very, very important that beekeepers regularly access their hives. Obviously, in summer when the weather's a little bit warmer, your bees are going to are much more happy for you to look at and inspect. In the cooler months, they're not going to get happy. You know, for commercial beekeepers on that capacity, they're obviously running between number of loads of bees that they've got situated in different areas. So the practices itself, they're two entirely different occupations at the end of the day, but largely it's all about setting a standard. So fundamentally, a beekeeper is important to making sure that they're looking for any visible signs of evidence, pests or looking for detection. Really important that those frames are really easy to inspect and well constructed. You know, to inspect here are also critical to looking for sugar shake and alcohol, also dry. So, you know, that's a really, really important inspection that needs to be occurring at least twice a year, sometimes 4 months apart, and make sure you're taking accurate records, even diary note time. You've inspected the hive on this date, and that will give you a really good data analysis, basically, of where hive health is actually at the moment, what precautions you might need to be healthy or witness pests and disease.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too. And we're going to talk a little bit about some more about that note taking in future talks as well, and a little bit more about today, because it's also part of the code where it stipulates very specifically that you need to make sure that you're making those particular notes. Now, the next part of the code really focuses on examining your hives regularly and making sure that you're looking for pests and diseases, so when you should be carrying that out. And so we've already gone through how to do a hive check, and so hopefully everyone will now know how to go about that and how to look at the frames, to look at the brood, and also do that sugar shake, alcohol wash, or drone uncapping to look for mites and other external pests. So of course you should be doing that regularly, at least twice a year, but as we've talked about, a bit more often than that is pretty good. And making sure that it's at least 4 months apart. So we're going to be coming into spring soon, and once we get into spring, that's when you really need to start thinking about checking your hive. So I guess we've got a little while, a little bit more winter yet to come, but not long till spring. So if your hive is checked regularly and you're keeping those records of that and looking for those pests, that's one way to make sure you're meeting that requirement. So the next requirement that we've got is around looking at whether or is making sure that your beehives are being managed well, even if they have been abandoned or they're not doing so well. So often beekeepers aren't quite as aware of this, but it's really important that once your hive is not very strong, that you step in and manage it to try and make it stronger or to destroy it. And if your hive has died out, you also need to make sure that you're managing that and preventing those bees from being victims of robber bees, which we've talked about before, and then coming in and spreading those diseases. So it's making sure you're managing that section effectively. Now, the next section in the code of practice is about managing AFB. Now, we've talked quite a bit about managing AFB and how you should go about that. But Jo, do you have anything to add to that? What are the key things we need to be remembering about managing AFB? We got you there still, Jo?
Yes, you do, Beck. I'm getting an awful lot of double feedback. I'm hearing you twice at the moment, so it's proving quite the challenge to keep up. But anyway, now managing AFB, a few really important highlights, I think, especially from everybody's perspective, is that, you know, if you have suspicions that you have AFB, please take all the precautions that you need to bee proof effectively that hive itself. Make sure that, you know, you're taking all necessary steps, notifying the department of that possible infection, sending a test in. Where there are two elements possible for managing AFB in Queensland, so the first and foremost, obviously, is sterilisation. Secondly, it is the destruction of the beehive. Now, I know that that's something that is a heartbreaking moment for any beekeeper to have to undertake. You know, this is really at the ultimate protecting the welfare of the industry. By you taking that practice of sure that you eradicate that disease from your apiary, you're protecting the local bees in your area, the other beekeepers within, and also your other apiaries. So it's really clear, you know, we often have reports that come into myself of abandoned hives. You know, we really do to contact DAF on 132523 to report those hives. Contact Rebecca's another option as well. But the QBA do actively follow up on any of abandoned hives or anything like that to make sure that, you know, the situation is dealt with very, very swiftly and in a manner. But, you know, we're here also about providing an opportunity to educate people about these. And I think the most important thing on that be that we really have to emphasise, not a part of a beekeeping club or part of the QBA, have a serious think about joining them. The beekeepers in Queensland offer a wealth of knowledge, a massive history of beekeepers that have, you know, gone there and walked those steps that you're probably walking now. So I really encourage people that if you're suspicious that you have AFB or you're pretty positive, get your test and deal with your hive the right way. If you need help, put your hand up for help. You know, there's a lot of people out there willing to give you a hand. It's nothing to be embarrassed about or shameful of, but if you follow the right steps, it's all about a happier, healthier.
Great, thanks, Jo. Those are really important points and important things to remember. And hopefully the last few talks have really helped everyone to be up to date about how to recognise AFB, what to do to send in a test, and how to manage it. But of course, if you have more questions, that's what we're here to do, is to help you with those questions. So just give me a quick call and I can talk you through the whole process. Now, the next part of the code covers something that I think often beekeepers see as less important. And I know when I started with my bees, I started with my mum, and my mum would be out there with a notebook every single time writing down what we were doing. And I'd be thinking, Mum, come and help me. Stop your writing notes. But now I notice and I realise that just how important it really is to have good record keeping when you're a beekeeper. So keeping records of any inspections you do, any tests that you run, any symptoms that you see, any pests or diseases that you suspect or you do find. All of these are really essential that you keep a good record of that Also, anytime you move a hive, so where you move it to, where you move it from, and anything you introduce. So if you bring in a frame from a different hive, if you've got new equipment coming in, any of that, it's really important to write that stuff down, because if it comes down the line when you find out that you've got a pest or disease, you'll have to do what many of our current government employees are doing right now, and that is contact tracing and going back to all the things that where you might have picked it up. And so if you've got really good records that you go, oh, you know, 2 months ago you put a new frame in from a different hive, could have come from there, and it'll help you trace back. So that recording is really important. And of course, beekeepers also need to keep a record of their own training. So any training that you have done, for example, if you undertake the online bee biosecurity course with PHA, that's a really great course. And that course is something that you should, record when you do that, so you know when you need to go back and do a refresher. And for the code of practice, it also requires beekeepers to undertake some kind of training. So make sure that when you're doing that training, that record is kept. And you should keep your records either, little old notebook and paper, or if it's electronic, if you want to keep electronic records, keep them for at least 3 years. So that's the kind of time that you need to make sure that you're covered and you know what's happened in the past for your particular hives. And that's going to also be really important if you ever need to sell your hives or want to sell your hives. People may want to know what's gone on with that hive and what's happened to it. So good record taking is really important. Jo, can you give me any tips on how to take good notes and what you should be recording?
Yeah, sure. So the best thing about the beekeeping industry, one of our key assets and resources is the Bee site. The benefits about the Be Aware site is that it addresses a number of key resources for beekeepers. So one, obviously, is what we recognise the Biosecurity Code of Practice. Another is a beekeeping manual for beekeeping. There's also a number of different templates you can actually use it for. I know a lot of beekeepers have adapted those templates. I'm more sort of familiar with their operations because, beekeeping operations are unique, different to one. But I think more so for hobby and amateurs, there's actually an application-based software that you can use, a phone or an iPad or something along those lines that you can track and record pests within your apiary. There's even ability for you to take a photo of what you're actually seeing at the time and upload that to your software. So it's like a daily sort of a calendar check, and you can easily go back to those notes and check whenever you want to. Two of them that I know that are being used through some of our commercial beekeepers, one is called the Hive Keeper app, and the other one's actually called Bee Plus Beekeeping Manager. And those two pieces of software are really fantastic. They're incredibly extensive and allow you to keep that good track record because, if you're in a position that you are requested by the department that they need to conduct an inspection on your hive, you'll need to go these records, and it's really important that there's accuracy in the records as well. So, but there's a lot of different resources. The QBA is more than help you, point you in the right direction, and help with how to actually keep track of these records itself, templates that are available. So anyone out there that's looking for one, feel free to drop the QBA email and point you in the right direction.
Great. Thanks, Jo. And I'm sure in the next couple of sessions of talks, I'll be doing one on record taking and note keeping for beekeepers because it is such an important thing to do. Now, the next section of the code is something we haven't really touched about on a whole very much in our talk so far, and that is construction and branding of your hives. So if you're buying your hives commercially, most of the time they should be fine. They should conform to what's required for beekeepers, but it's always important to just check. And the things that you need to be concerned about here are that all the surfaces are intact, and that's particularly important when you're talking about things like wax moths. which love little crevices, like hiding in little places. Even small hive beetle, they can get in there and hide if you've got surfaces that aren't intact. So that's really important. And of course, robber bees, you don't want them getting in there. And what goes in hand with having an intact surface is also making sure that you have only the required number of entrances, so that the entrances need to be specifically designed and not an excess number. So usually 1 or 2 entrances for a hive. Any more than that, and what you have is the bees that have to guard those entrances. You need more of those because there's more areas to guard, and that's a lot more time, energy put in by your bees, or they don't guard them, and that's even worse in some ways because that will allow robber bees to come into your hive. So making sure that those entrances of the hive are very specific and very limited so that you don't have your bees working overtime or intruders coming in. You also, of course, need to brand your hive, and what I mean by that is put your hive identification number on. Now, you'll get your hive identification sent to you when you register, so that number will come in and you need to put it on the front of your hive. If you're putting up any catch boxes, you also need to make sure that these catch boxes only contain foundation, so don't put honey in there or anything else to attract things in. And that's because, of course, that honey or whatever else you put in there could be contaminated with pests and diseases. So you just want that clean foundation in there. And mark any of your catch boxes with your name and contact details. That's just if someone finds them, they know what to do. If they notice that there's bees in there, they know who to contact. And also they know it belongs to someone. It's not an abandoned hive that they can take off with them. So putting your contact details in there isn't just good for people who need to manage the bees or the department. It's really important to stop people